Hey, Luke, great to have you on today.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. So thanks for joining. It would be great as a starting point if you're just able to provide us a little bit of context at a high level about how Domo goes to market and your role and focus inside the organization.
Yeah, Domo goes to market through a handful of different channels. We've got global account executive sellers as well as global account development managers that support them within territories, and then to some aspect through partners around the globe as well. But most of our outbound sales opportunities are coming through that partnership between an account executive and an account development manager in prospecting within those territories.
Cool. And what's your main focus inside the team?
Yeah, work on the operations side, so helping maintain and manage any of the systems and processes that those teams are using, including that whole prospecting motion.
Cool. Great to hear. Now, when Allegro came into the equation, how were you introduced to us and, how did you find us?
Yeah, one of our sales leaders brought Allegrow up in conversation a couple of times, and started to sort of dive in and start that evaluation. It was at a time where the industry was starting to change quite a bit. We had some Google and Yahoo changes sort of impending, and we knew we had to do something in order to make sure our reputation and our email volume was staying secure. And Allegro ended up being the solution for that.
Makes a ton of sense. Now, can you give us a little bit of context on what kind of results you've seen on Allegro so far and just what stands out to you about the platform?
Yeah. I think what stands out the most to me, and probably our favorite part from an operations perspective, is that our sellers get to continue to do what they're doing. We on the operations side and with our other teams are able to configure this to do what we need to protect ourselves without having the team members have to remember a filter or have to remember to fact check this or that. Really able to keep their time and effort spent prospecting, while we're still protecting ourselves from a corporate perspective.
Cool.
Overall, in sort of our first 12 months here, we've had over 75,000 contacts be stopped by the safety net, where we're protecting our domain reputation in that case. And then in addition to that, we've also been able to scale up a lot of this prospecting. So across an 8-month period, we almost doubled our email send volume while maintaining a really similar bounce rate at less than 2%. So we're able to protect that in the long run.
Okay, great. And to give everyone a little bit of idea of kind of the scale of the team and stage you guys are at, how large is the global sales team at this point at Domo?
Yeah, a couple hundred, if we
Cool.
look at that account executive in that ADM role.
Great to hear. And when you're thinking about the risks of, deliverability or an email landing in a spam folder, what are the main things that come to mind as an operations executive when you're thinking, right, this could be a problem that I'm going to prioritize solving? What kind of would keep you up at night?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us was protecting our corporate domain. We don't want to send our outbound traffic from a different domain. We have some branding considerations and things there. So as the sales team, we have to make sure we're being a steward of that corporate domain. If
Yeah.
that were to have its reputation impacted greatly, that would stop all of our operations, not just the sales team, but there'd be product considerations, there'd be internal email considerations and all of that.
That makes a ton of sense. I mean, we have this conversation all the time where marketers think a lot about last attribution touch point, right? Was it an ad that got them in? Was it something else over here? But sellers tend to forget about that a little bit of the time. And I've seen with other companies and with Domo, when you get to a certain ACV level, email is pretty much always the last touch point before the deal closes, right? So if you're in a conversation with someone, it might go on for months at the higher ACV points. To get that contract signed, to get the person implemented, you're probably multi-threading with different decision makers, right? So what we've seen a lot of is the complaints really come through and it becomes a priority when reps are saying things like, hey, this person was meant to sign and I was going to send an email to their CFO, or we're going to get our head of product to send an email to their head of product. And we're starting to hear complaints that it's just not working the way that it used to, and the emails are lying in spam folders. So when you're thinking about that corporate domain as an asset, is that really the main worry that you're seeing? You're thinking, well, hey, If it doesn't work for those really, really end of funnel communications, the top of funnel activity is somewhat wasted.
Yeah, 100%. We've heard stories, customer support wasn't able to send a calendar invite to the customer in order to solve a problem. Really any of those things, if you split the business into thinking about our prospecting and our new logo pursuits, and then all of our customer pursuits over here, if that corporate email domain gets it in a bad way, every interaction with a customer is going to be made 10x harder. And we ultimately would probably have to do something fairly drastic at the company level. So protecting that up front, especially in that new logo pursuit sort of bucket there, will protect our relationships with our customers and our ability to just do business with them.
Makes a ton of sense. And one thing we touched on there was you mentioned 75,000 email touch points have been prevented with the safety net. If someone doesn't quite understand what that means, could you give us a little bit of context on what that looks like inside the go-to-market organization? What happens where an email gets prevented?
Yeah, if you take a general outbound sales process, maybe an AE or an ADM is finding a contact, whether that be in your internal database or from some third-party vendor, bringing that in and adding it to some sort of messaging with whatever provider you've got there. With Allegro, if that email is not a high quality email, it's going to never let that first email be sent out. So we're not even hitting the bounce. We're not even hitting those spam filters on that first message. Now, for us, what that's doing internally is stopping that initial cadence or that initial set of messaging and sending a notice back to our employee and saying, hey, you need to do more research here. Maybe we need to find a different email address. Maybe we need to find a different contact at this organization to reach out to. So when something gets caught by the safety net, we reroute that to what we call the safety net cadence, which has manual research steps. It's using an automated way in order to stop that bad traffic from ever being sent, and then proactively notifying those account team members in order to take their next best action.
And it's not just the prevention, it's also they're being rerouted, which I think is a really interesting concept. So let's say the team want to sell to an enterprise account. They're not just going to have an email stopped and then move on to do the exact same thing again with someone else. They're going to stop the email, understand why that contact's risky, and say, well, how can we pick our spots better here? Great. And then keeping the bounce rate, I think another concept to just touch on briefly is the bounce rate stayed below 2%, but email volume across the team has doubled in the span of 8 months. And is that something that you felt like to hit the goals you had to do, or is it something that you've now decided we are going to increase volume because we know that we have this security mechanism in place? How do you think about that process, or is it something that would just happen really regardless of bounce rate?
Yeah, good question. I would say it was not a directive to double our email volume. That was probably more so just happenstance based on different pipeline programs that we were running. What we were able to do on the operations side is let the teams run and pull the lists for event invites and do the emails that they wanted to without us having to be rigid about what contact scores they were pulling or what filters they were adding. We were able to have confidence from our side to let them do what they wanted to do. And that email volume sort of happened to double over that 8 months.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing essentially is if you have that built into your infrastructure of saying we know there's a risk analysis in place that happens, it has empowered the team to run more go-to-market programs, to run more go-to-market experiments that's led to the email volume increasing. It wasn't like we turned around and said, hey, we need to double volume this year. Let's go and do it. It would have happened regardless. Yeah. It's a question of saying when we know this is in place, we can just empower our sellers and our operators to run the programs they think are the best.
Absolutely. And we also get much more real-time monitoring of how that traffic is performing. Without Allegrow, if we ran a pipeline generation activity, it might be, by the time we found out there was an issue with the email domain, it would already be too late.
And where are we seeing that come through inside Allegrow? How does that get analyzed from your side?
Yeah, really, it's a couple of our managers that are looking at that. We get the proactive notifications about how that reputation score has changed. when we see a drop there, making sure we're communicating about that and trying to determine what happened there, and why did we see that, and then seeing if we can correct those actions. But the proactive notifications and daily email alerts make that pretty easy to do.
That's awesome to see. I mean, I'm seeing on your account here that, you've reached over a 97% sender reputation. Of course, 100 is the very best you can get to. So super high sender reputation there. But it doesn't mean to say there haven't been instances where there's been declines that have then been addressed and continue to make sure that email is an effective channel in the future, right?
The recency of getting notified and then understanding what happened yesterday is a heck of a lot easier than getting notified and trying to remember what pipeline activities we did 3 or 4 weeks ago. Yeah, I mean, it would
Yeah,
be impossible for us to retroactively understand what had happened there in a 30-day look back period. In a 3 or 4 day look back period, we could actually remember what the heck happened or go investigate that.
great. The final question on my side is, how did you find the implementation onboarding experience with Allegro?
Yeah, I think the implementation and onboarding experience was awesome. I think the level of effort there from an operations perspective is pretty low. Getting those email inboxes connected and a couple of things authenticated, and you're off and running there from that perspective. So that was a really great experience.
Awesome stuff. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Luke. And yeah, we're super proud to have you as a customer at Allegrow.
Thanks so much.